If God wanted you to hear the sound of hell, He wouldn't make you listen to a volcano erupting, nor would He have you listen to a hurricane screaming. He would lock you in a 6x6 tin box, strap a pair of cheap Bakelite headphones to your ears, and make you sit there for 4 hours, listening to a monotonous, repetitive, maddening sound. Ping, ping. That is the heartbeat of the ocean and the countdown to death. My name is Thomas Harrison, but in the South Pacific of 1944, aboard the destroyer escort USS England DE-635, nobody called me by my name. They called me Ears, or Sonar Tom. I was the ship's chief sonar operator. My world had no color, only a ghostly green glow, and that most bone-chilling sound of all, the metallic ping reflecting off the hull of an Imperial Japanese Navy submarine. People always talk about the dive bombers at Midway or the Marines at Iwo Jima. Those are the grand spectacles the war Hollywood loves. But our war was private, claustrophobic. It was a knife fight in a pitch-black room filled with water. The story I want to tell you exists as a mere footnote in most history books. It happened in May 1944 in the hot, humid, God-forsaken waters north of the Solomon Islands. In the span of 12 days, just 12 days, our unassuming little ship, as if possessed by the goddess of vengeance, sank 6 Japanese submarines in a row. 6. It wasn't just a record, it was a miracle. In those days, many destroyers went the entire war without sinking a single sub. Yet we, like a surgeon, surgically severed the central nervous system of the Japanese combined fleet. It wasn't luck, though we often joked that it was. It was technology, intelligence, and the iron will forged by Captain Walton Pendleton's near-obsessive training. Early 1944 in the South Pacific was hot enough to steam you alive. The England was a Buckley-class destroyer escort. If you don't know what that means, imagine a standard Fletcher-class destroyer, shrink it down, strip off most of the armor, remove 2 main guns, and swap in cheaper engines. That was us. We displaced only 1,400 tons and measured 306 feet long. In rough seas, the ship staggered like a drunkard. Even the most seasoned sailors would empty their lunches into the sea. The Navy built ships like ours for one purpose: escort duty. We were the nannies of the main fleet, the sheepdogs for the transports. Our lives were cheap. If we ran into a Japanese battleship or heavy cruiser, our tactical manual had only one line: lay smokescreen and pray. But we had one thing that was different. That was our skipper, Lieutenant Commander Walton B. Pendleton. Pendleton was a Southerner, possessing the stern reserve of an old-school officer. His uniform was always starched crisp. Even in the maddening wet heat of the doldrums, his collar button was never undone. He had eyes like a hawk that could pierce right through your facade. "Harrison," he said to me once, standing behind me during a watch, his voice low. "Do you know why the Japanese are terrifying?" "Because of their long-lance torpedoes, sir," I answered nervously, my palms sweating. "No, it's because they have patience." Pendleton watched the rotating scan line on the sonar screen. They lie in wait underwater like crocodiles, motionless. Even when the air in their lungs is about to run out, they endure. To kill a crocodile, you must have more patience than they do, and you need better teeth. To sharpen those teeth, Pendleton drove us crazy. From the moment we left Pearl Harbor, if we weren't fighting, we were drilling. Day or night, the alarm would sound. "General quarters! General quarters!" His undeniable voice would boom over the 1MC. We'd roll out of our hammocks and rush to gun stations in our skivvies. Loaders practiced until their fingers bled, shoving heavy shells into breeches over and over. And I was locked in the sonar room, listening to tapes on loop, every sound imaginable. Warm currents, shrimp beds, even the echo of our own screws. "Listen again," Lieutenant Granger, the sonar officer, would yell at me. Tell me how this differs from an I-class sub. We hated that life back then. We thought it was just the skipper's sadism, until that May arrived and changed everything. Besides the training, we had a secret weapon. It was mounted on the forecastle, just aft of the #1 gun mount. Usually, it was covered by canvas, looking like a cluster of strange iron pipes. That was the Mark X Hedgehog anti-submarine mortar. Before the Hedgehog, anti-submarine warfare was a frustrating guessing game. Traditional depth charges were rolled off the stern. This meant that once you detected a sub, you had to speed the ship up, run directly over the sub's position, and drop the charges. But there was a huge logical flaw. When you sprinted over the sub, your own engine noise and propeller wake would completely blind your sonar. In those critical seconds before the attack, you were blind. If the sub turned its rudder even slightly, you bombed nothing but water. Furthermore, depth charges were detonated by water pressure. They exploded whether they hit the target or not. Once they detonated, the ocean would churn violently, paralyzing the sonar for 10 or 15 minutes. The Hedgehog was different. It was revolutionary. The device had 24 firing spigots pointing forward. When fired, it lobbed 24 warheads, like oversized mortar shells, 250 yards ahead of the bow, forming an elliptical pattern about 100 feet in diameter. The beauty of it was the fuse. It was contact detonated. That meant they would only explode if a warhead directly struck the metal hull of the submarine. If we missed, no explosion, no interference, the water remained quiet. I could keep a death grip on the target with sonar, correct the data immediately, and launch a second or third attack. But if it banged... If you hear a bang, the gunnery chief would say, patting the iron beast, it means those Japs' pressure hull just got punched. At that depth, even a small hole means high-pressure seawater will slice through the men inside like a water jet. We had the best crew, the best captain, and the meanest weapon. Now, we just lacked one thing: prey. By mid-May 1944, a strange atmosphere began to spread through the Pacific Fleet. While resupplying at Manus Island, we saw massive carriers and battleships assembling. Rumors were flying. Some said we were hitting the Philippines. Others said we were going straight for Tokyo. But I knew something was happening, because the guys in the radio room had gone unusually silent. It was the secret of Ultra and Magic. We grunts didn't understand those code names back then. We only knew that sometimes an intelligence officer would rush into the captain's cabin with a red-bordered folder marked Top Secret, and then our course would suddenly change. In reality, thousands of miles away in a basement in Hawaii, the geniuses of naval intelligence had cracked the Japanese Navy's codes. Admiral Somu Toyoda, commander of the Japanese Combined Fleet, was planning a massive gamble, Operation Ago. He intended to force a decisive battle with the U.S. Navy near the Mariana Islands. For this plan, he needed eyes. He needed to know when the American fleet sortied and what route they took. So, the Japanese submarine force sortied in full strength. 7 of their most advanced submarines were sent northeast of the Admiralty Islands to establish a scout line designated NA. They were like a tripwire strung across the path the Americans had to take north. If they succeeded, our carrier groups would be exposed. Thousands of pilots and sailors would die. On May 18th, an urgent cable reached the headquarters of Escort Division 39. We received our orders. The England, along with 2 other destroyer escorts, the USS George, DE 697, and USS Raby, DE 698, formed a hunter-killer group. Our mission was simple: proceed to the waters north of Bougainville. Intelligence indicated a Japanese submarine was ferrying a supply of rice to that area. It's like looking for a needle in a haystack, my second, sonarman second-class Carlson, complained as he untangled his headset cord. No, Carlson, I said, putting on my headphones and adjusting the frequency knob. letting the familiar static fill my ears. This is different. This time, someone told us where the needle is. May 19th, 1944. 1300 hours. The sea was calm, like a giant sheet of blue silk, and the sun baked the deck viciously. The thermometer on the bridge had topped out. Lookouts squinted, sweat running down their collars. I sat in the sonar room, where the recycled air smelled of machine oil. The fan turned lazily. Ping, ping. The sonar return was clean, just the background noise of waves slapping the hull. 1335 hours. The sound in the headset changed. It wasn't the fuzzy, soft echo of a biological contact. It was a crisp, metallic clack, followed by the pitch shift of the Doppler effect. Ding! The hair on my body stood up instantly. I had heard this sound countless times on the tapes. Sonar contact, I yelled into the microphone, louder than I realized. Bearing 010, range 2000. On the bridge, Captain Pendleton's reaction was lightning fast. Right full rudder, course 015, all ahead flank. Notify George and Raby, we've got him. The ship heeled violently. It was the famous Japanese submarine I-16, not a small coastal sub, but a massive Type C-1 cruiser submarine, over 100 meters long, carrying life-saving rice to the besieged Japanese troops. But in this moment, she was just my prey. The George rushed in first. I heard her drop depth charges on the sonar. Boom, boom, boom! Massive explosions rattled my headphones. The water turned into chaos. Contact lost, I shouted. Too much turbulence. The depth charges missed. I-16 was diving frantically, trying to use the bubble screen from the explosions to escape. Her skipper was a veteran. He was making evasive snake maneuvers. In the old days, we might have lost him, but Captain Pendleton didn't give up. Stay quiet, Harrison. He's there. Find him. The captain's voice came over the intercom, unnaturally calm. I closed my eyes, trying to distinguish that single discordant frequency amidst the roar of the depth charge aftermath. Minutes passed like centuries. Then, in a gap in the noise, I heard it again. The cavitation of screws turning at high speed. He was accelerating. Regained contact, bearing drifting right, range 1,000 yards. He's going deep, depth 300 feet. We're going in, Pendleton ordered. Stand by, Hedgehogs. The England cut into the attack run like a shark that smelled blood. This was completely different from depth charges. We were running straight at him. Range 800 yards, course correction. Range 600 yards, steady. My heart felt like it was going to leap out of my throat. This was real combat. This wasn't the simulator at Pearl. If I calculated wrong, those 24 bombs would miss, or worse, that sub would turn and put a torpedo in us. Fire! I felt the bow shudder violently. The distinctive thump, 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 thump ripple fire sounded. That was 24 messengers of death arching into the sky. The next dozen seconds were the quietest moments on Earth. All the Hedgehogs entered the water. No explosion. I held my breath. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. Did we miss? Was my calculation? Clang! A dull, heavy, yet incredibly penetrating sound slammed into the ship's bottom. It was different from a surface explosion. It came from the seabed, sounding like someone had struck a steel plate with a giant hellhammer. That was the warhead punching through I-16's pressure hull. Then, rumble boom, a series of explosions. Not one Hedgehog, but 4, 5, maybe more. Finally, a deafening crack, the sub's own torpedoes or magazine detonating. Target hit, repeat, confirmed hit, I screamed frantically. Secondary explosions underwater, target breaking up. I ripped off the headset. My ears were still ringing. When we ran out to the deck, the sea was no longer calm. A massive bubble surged to the surface, carrying murky oil, splintered wood, And more specific evidence, a rice bag with Japanese markings bobbed up, the grain spilling into the oil-blackened water. That was the dinner the starving Japanese on Bougainville would never eat. Did we cheer? Yes, everyone cheered. Sailors slapped each other on the back. Gunners threw their hats in the air. But as I looked at that black oil slick, a chill ran through me. Over 100 men in that instant had been crushed to pulp by immense water pressure or suffocated in a dark iron coffin. This was our war. No face-to-face combat, only data on dials and the death that followed. Captain Pendleton came down from the bridge. He wore a tired smile, but he didn't join the revelry. He looked at the northern horizon, his gaze intense. "Good work, boys," he said, "but this is just the beginning." He was right. We didn't know it then, but I-16 was just a passerby who ran out of luck. To the north, in the vast, deep ocean, 5 more submarines were waiting for us. That NA scout line, that Viper meant to strangle the American fleet, was lying in wait, and we had just drawn our knife. After sinking I-16, I thought we would head back, or at least catch a breath. I was wrong. The teletype in the radio room spit out a long new strip of paper, dense with punched holes. It was a direct order from Fleet Radio Unit Pacific, FRUPAC, at Pearl Harbor. It wasn't until much later that I learned the shocking truth behind that message. The Japanese Navy hadn't panicked over losing I-16. Instead, they were executing a plan rigid to the point of madness. They were establishing the NA line north of Manus Island. 7 subs lined up like fence posts miles apart, waiting silently for the American fleet to crash into them. The Japanese thought it was a steel wall, but on our chart table, it was a hit list. "That's what's waiting for us," Pendleton told the officers, pointing to the neat pencil line on the chart. "They aren't patrolling. They're queuing up and taking numbers. Our job is to punch their tickets." So, the England came about and steamed north. The air grew heavier. This wasn't a battle anymore. It was an execution. May 22nd, 0330 hours. The night was as thick as ink, only the radar antenna rotating silently atop the mast. Most men were in their hammocks stealing a few minutes of sleep, but I was awake. If you drank as much industrial-grade black coffee as I did, you'd be awake too. "Radar contact, bearing 350, range 14000 yards. The report from CIC, Combat Information Center, shattered the dead silence of the night. It was RO-106. This medium-sized row-class sub was on the surface charging batteries. Her skipper probably figured the odds of running into a U.S. warship in this vast ocean on such a dark night were lower than winning the lottery, but he forgot about radar. "All ahead flank," Pendleton ordered. As we closed to 4,000 yards, the Japanese spotted us. The radar blip vanished. She submerged. Now it was my turn. Sonar has the con. I sonar. I took a deep breath and turned up the gain. The sound of waves slapping the hull became a roar in the headset. I had to filter the noise out. 0350 hours. Ping. Ping. "Contact," I yelled. "Target dead ahead, depth 200 feet, braking right." The coordination was even smoother than the last time. The George swept the sea with searchlights to pressure the Japanese, while we killed all lights, cutting into the attack position like a ghost. "It's textbook," I heard Carlson mutter beside me, "just like a drill at Newport. But drills don't kill people." 0425 hours. Hedgehogs away. In the pitch black, you couldn't see the warheads hit the water. You could only wait. Suddenly, the ocean lit up from below. It wasn't fire. It was an eerie orange-red glow radiating from the deep, instantly illuminating the black water, as if a volcano had erupted on the seabed. Then the surface was torn apart by a giant hand. A massive column of water shot into the sky, carrying flame and debris. Boom! The shockwave slammed into our hull as if we had run aground. The England shuddered violently, and the sonar screen instantly turned to snow. "That was a direct hit," the lookout screamed. "The wave is gonna swamp us." At least 3 Hedgehog projectiles had hit RO-106 simultaneously. In an instant, the sea rushed into the breached hull. The short-circuiting batteries likely vaporized everyone inside in a flash of superheated steam. That was number 2. When dawn broke, we saw cork insulation and oil floating on the surface. No survivors. We didn't stop, because there were more names on the list. The next 48 hours blurred in my memory. Time and space melted together in fatigue, leaving only a sequence of repetitive actions. Detect, track, fire, explode. We were like workers on a death assembly line. May 23rd, morning, RO-104. This sub was just north of RO-106. The intelligence was terrifyingly accurate. When we reached the coordinates, she was there, like she was waiting for a bus. RO-104 tried to get cute. Her skipper used the so-called knuckles tactic, a sudden sharp turn to create violent water turbulence, trying to create a false sonar echo to confuse me. "2 targets," Carlson shouted. "1 left, 1 right." I closed my eyes, distinguishing the texture of the echo. The false target's echo was loose, hissing. The real target's echo was tight, crisp. "Right target is false, that's a knuckle," I corrected loudly. "Track left, that's steel." Pendleton didn't hesitate, turning hard left. 2 more Hedgehog salvos. RO-104 became the 3rd pile of scrap metal on the bottom. May 24th, early morning, RO-116. Not even 24 hours later, we caught the 4th. By this time, a numbness had set in among the crew. The ecstasy of the first kill was gone, replaced by a chilling professional detachment. I looked at the ashtray next to the sonar stack. It was overflowing. My fingers cramped from pressing the knobs for so long. RO-116 died quickly. She didn't even have time for many maneuvers. The first pattern of Hedgehogs pinned her to the seabed. When the 4th violent explosion echoed, I just mechanically logged the time and coordinates in the journal. On deck, sailors began painting Japanese flags on the side of the bridge. 4 red crosses. "This isn't normal, Tom." This time, the prey was RO-108. This battle was harder than any before, not just because the Japanese were getting more cautious, but because the ocean itself was fighting us. We hit a thermocline. To a layman, it's a strange word. To a sonar man, it's a nightmare. The ocean isn't uniform. Due to sunlight and currents, the upper layer is warm, the lower layer cold. Where they meet, a mirror-like reflective layer forms. Sonar waves hitting this layer refract or reflect. They can't penetrate. A sub just has to hide below the thermocline, and it's behind an invisible wall. "Contact lost," I shouted desperately that afternoon. "Sound waves are bouncing back. He's under the layer." RO-108 was smart. She hovered at that depth. I knew she was there, but I couldn't see her. George and Raby dropped depth charges to force her up or blast a hole in the layer, but to no avail. Captain Pendleton came down from the bridge, straight to the sonar room door. He looked at me, sweating buckets. "Harrison, I know he's there. I know you know he's there." His voice was quiet but forceful. "Charts say the layer here is about 200 feet. We're going to gamble." "Gamble on what, sir?" "We won't attack by echolocation. We'll attack by prediction." Pendleton grabbed a chart. "He thinks he's safe in the blind zone, so he won't maneuver hard to save battery. We fire blind." It was a crazy plan. Hedgehogs usually required precise data. We calculated a lead based on RO-108's last known position and heading. The England slid silently over the surface, emitting no active pings to startle him. When we reached the spot, I still heard nothing, just the clutter bouncing off the thermocline. "Fire!" Again, 24 Hedgehogs into the water. The wait was longer than ever. Without echo guidance, this was a complete shot in the dark. 5 seconds, 10 seconds, 15 seconds, just when I thought we had failed. Thud, thud, thud. The sound wasn't as crisp as previous explosions because it came through the thick thermal layer, sounding like someone beating a heavy carpet. But it was an explosion, unmistakably. Then, the sea boiled over. Huge globs of oil breached the thermocline and floated to the surface. Number 5, we had punched through the ocean's shield and killed the enemy hiding beneath. That night, Admiral Halsey's congratulatory message came over the speaker. It was short, just one line. "Let me have some of that drive." The crew laughed. It was the first genuine laugh in days. But I couldn't laugh. I started having auditory hallucinations. Even in my quiet bunk, I could hear the sonar screaming. We were running low on ammo. We were down to our last stocks of Hedgehogs. Fuel was critical. "We're going home, right?" Carlson asked me, his eyes as red as a rabbit's. I looked at the calendar on the wall. May 28th. "I guess so," I said. "Even God only took 7 days to make the world. We've done enough." But Lady Luck is a cruel mistress. She wasn't done with us. Just as we were turning south, intelligence sent another coordinate. Just one. The last one. RO105. That name would recur in my nightmares for the rest of my life. It wasn't a hunt. It was a suffocating duel that lasted 30 hours. It was the ultimate test of human will. If the previous 5 hunts were sprints, dealing with RO105 was a marathon in mud. May 30th, early morning. We found her a few hundred miles northwest of Manus. By then, we were at our limit, men and ship alike. My eyes felt like they were full of sand. Every blink was torture. The ship's coffee was gone. The last few pots were brewed from reused grounds, tasting like dishwater. Worse, our ammo, those precious Hedgehogs, was down to the last few salvos. RO105's skipper was a lieutenant commander named Inoue. I didn't know him, but I will never forget him. He was the toughest opponent we ever faced. Contact, bearing 190. The battle started well enough. George rushed in with Hedgehogs. Missed. Raby tried depth charges. Missed. Commander Inoue was a ghost. He wove between 2 different thermal layers, using the water density difference to twist our sonar waves. Every time we thought we had a lock to fire, he'd suddenly change depth or release a submarine bubble target to confuse us. From the morning of the 30th to noon, then to dusk. The sun rose and set. We circled on the surface, the sonar room filled with the stench of despair. "He's gone again, Tom." Carlson threw his headset on the desk, head in his hands. "He's not there. We're chasing ghosts." "Shut up." I gritted my teeth, readjusting the frequency knob, my fingers trembling uncontrollably from the strain. As long as he's underwater, he has to breathe. He has to use electricity. He's a man, not a god. Throughout the day, we made countless false attacks. Every time the alarm sounded, exhausted sailors had to drag their lead-filled legs to gun stations. By nightfall, worse news arrived. Admiral Spruance and Admiral Halsey sent urgent cables. They were worried. We had delayed too long. Not only was ammo out, but fuel was barely enough to return. If we didn't leave, we'd become floating targets ourselves. Division Commander recommends abandoning search, return to Manus. The radio man handed the message to Pendleton. The air on the bridge froze. Captain Pendleton held the paper, looking at the pitch-black sea. Stubble covered his cheeks, his eyes were sunken, and he looked 10 years older. But he crumpled the paper in his fist. Reply. His voice was raspy, but hard as iron. "We'll try again. Unless there's only 1 drop of oil left in the tanks, I am not leaving." It was insubordination that risked his career. If we didn't catch it in the next few hours, Pendleton could face a court-martial. May 31st, dawn, day 12. The first light pierced the eastern clouds. The sea was iron gray. RO105 had been submerged for over 24 hours. Her batteries had to be dry, her oxygen foul. Commander Inoue must have known we were still circling overhead. It was a contest of endurance, waiting to see who blinked first. 0729 hours. George found the target again and attacked. Failed. 3 Hedgehogs misfired. The rest went wide. RO-105 used this gap to execute a brilliant maneuver. Instead of diving deeper, she suddenly positioned herself directly between the 2 escort ships, George and Raby, in their blind spot. She was right in the middle. Neither ship could fire without hitting the other. "Look at that crafty bastard," Pendleton cursed through his binoculars, but there was respect in it. "He's using our formation against us." Now, RO-105 was trying to slip away. "England, cut in," the captain ordered. We were the only ship in firing position. "Harrison, this is the last chance." The captain's voice came over the sonar speaker. "And the last ammo, don't screw it up." The pressure sat on my chest like a mountain. I closed my eyes, blocking out everything. No wave noise, no engine hum, no fear. Only that scan line. Ping! The echo was faint, right on the edge of our baffle zone, but I caught it, the desperate churning of propellers. "Bearing 180, range 700 yards. He's turning. He's trying to surface and fight." "Left full rudder." The England's massive bulk carved a white arc on the sea, the bow swinging to bite that invisible point. "Hedgehogs, fire!" The last salvo. 24 deaths. They flew out, splashing into the water. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. I took off my headset. I didn't want to hear it. I wanted to feel it with my body. Boom! This explosion was more violent than the previous 5. It wasn't just the Hedgehogs. It was a sympathetic detonation. We had hit her torpedo room or magazine. The massive shock wave lifted the England bodily, then slammed her back onto the water. Every light bulb in the sonar room shattered, throwing us against the bulkheads in the dark. When we stumbled up to the deck, we saw a scene from hell. A gigantic mushroom-shaped column of water towered hundreds of feet high. Then debris rained down. Mattresses, clothing, planks, and body parts, and oil. Heavy black fuel gushed up like blood, rapidly staining hundreds of yards of ocean. RO-105 was finished. Commander Inoue and his crew were gone. Number 6. 12 days, 6 subs. There were no cheers on the bridge, only a deathly silence. Men slumped against the railings, too weak to even raise a hand in victory. We watched the oil slick until it slowly dissipated in the waves. "It's over," Captain Pendleton whispered. He lit a cigarette, his hand shaking. "Let's go home." There was no grand movie-style parade when we returned to Manus Island. We were a group of stinking, unshaven ghosts with hollow eyes. When we docked, we could barely heave the mooring lines. But the commendations from Fleet Command arrived quickly. Along with them came case after case of ice-cold beer, more precious than gold in the tropical theater. However, it wasn't until weeks later, in mid-June, that we truly understood what we had done. It was the Battle of the Philippine Sea, famously known as the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot. In the largest aircraft carrier duel in human history, the U.S. Navy achieved a decisive victory, shooting down hundreds of Japanese planes and sinking their most advanced carriers, Taiho and Shokaku. Why? Why was the Japanese counterattack so feeble? Y-16, RO-106, RO-104, RO-116, RO-108, RO-105. The 6 sentries that should have sounded the alarm were lying silently thousands of meters deep, serving as homes for fish. Because of the lack of intelligence, Ozawa had to launch massive search patrols blindly, dispersing his force and losing the initiative. What we did in those 12 days wasn't just sinking a few ships. We had gouged out the giant's eyes. Before the main battle even started, we had helped win it. Chief of Naval Operations Admiral Ernest King later gave us a quote that was etched into U.S. Navy history. "There'll always be an England, right?" Later, I moved into a veterans nursing home in Virginia. It's quiet here, just the sound of cicadas outside the window. Sometimes, young nurses ask me, "Mr. Harrison, what did you do in the war? Did you shoot down planes?" I smile and shake my head. I tell them I was just a man who listened to sounds. What happened to the England? It's a sad story. In May 1945, during the Okinawa campaign, exactly 1 year after our miracle, a Japanese kamikaze suicide plane slammed into her. Even legends can't stop a mad era. That crash killed 37 of my brothers. The ship didn't sink, but she was too damaged to repair. After the war, she was sold for scrap. The hunter that once struck fear into the entire Japanese submarine force ended up as a pile of razor blades or car parts. But I still remember her. I remember the smell of diesel, the stifling heat, and Captain Pendleton's hawk-like eyes. Most importantly, I remember those sounds. Whenever the night is deep and quiet, if I close my eyes, I can still hear it. Ping, ping. That is the heartbeat of the ocean. That is the hot blood of our youth. That is the immortal legend written by courage and technology during those incredible 12 days.